Greetings, podcast listeners, and welcome to another exciting episode of All Things Thor. We're up to part 3 of Tom's journey into Imagineering, and he's going to continue with his story of how he became a Walt Disney Imagineer, the highs, the lows, and everything in between. So let's shift our microphone to the other side of the universe and let Tom continue with part 3 of becoming an Imagineer.
So, next episode, what it was like to be a Disney Imagineer. So the next memory I have after the last just sort of sharing that I just did was probably about 3 months into my hiring experience. And I was deep, as I already said, into designing an e-ticket attraction that I thought was going to blow minds. You know, I was dedicated to this project. And one of the cool things at that time, I don't know if they still do it, but like if there was research that needed to be done, if you were doing a project on a certain subject matter, Disney had no problem sending you to Europe or anywhere overseas where you could learn more about the audience that you were designing for and give you a sense of feeling for what you were about to do. So I think I already explained that they sent me to all the caves. Yeah, I did explain that. Available Carlsbad Caverns, that was a special tour that most people don't get to have, where we went deep, deep, deep down. Certainly wasn't the center of the earth, but it was deep enough. So now engineers were starting to come on board the team to design the ride track. You know, rides have to be a certain length of time to put a certain amount of people through the rides per hour. It's called THC, theoretical hourly capacity. Okay, so any company that's doing attractions like Disney or Universal or anybody else that knows what they're doing is trying to figure out, you know, how many people they can push through a ride that makes it sensible and balances out all the other experiences that they'll have in a day. And so the track not only had to fit into a giant volcano, but also, you know, had to have the length of the appropriate THC. And the climax of the ride was at the end, it was slow through the first part of it, so you got to see all the scenic things of being down below the center of the earth. But then at the end, you got blown out of the top of the volcano. And all that had to be factored in, you know, as far as the timing and everything. So at this point, I had done a ton of artwork that designated the scenic experiences that you're going to have when you had time to look at them. But at the very end, when you see the lava monster at Journey to the Center of the Earth, and then get blown out of the top of the volcano, and I'm not sure why they even asked me this question, other than that I was again, a director, and I was, kind of trying to steerhead the creative direction of this entire experience. But the engineers and the show producer came to me and they go, "Okay, so how long do you think people should experience zero gravity, like they're flying in the air and just got shot out of a volcano?" And so I'm thinking to myself, I should come up with an answer like I know what I'm talking about, but I've never been in zero gravity. I don't know. I have no freaking idea, but, they're all looking at me in this meeting. And I said, you know what? I'm not sure. And I think I threw out a number just to kind of pretend like I knew what I was talking about. I said, 15 or 20 seconds, And they said, okay. And that went down into the documents of the meeting as far as the project development. And so I was like, okay, everybody bought that. Doesn't sound unreasonable. So then I hear back from, I don't remember who it was. It was either the show producer or it was someone else higher above them that said, "Oh, guess what? We just arranged for you and the engineer working on the ride track system and a couple of others to go on an airplane trip that was specially arranged for you guys, where they're going to do what's called a parabolic arc." It's the same thing that NASA does for astronauts. They call it the Vomit Comet. And it's usually a much larger plane. And it does what's called a parabola, which is an arc where you accelerate up and over an arch. If you imagine an arch in the sky, where at some point at the peak or climax of the arch, before it starts to descend, gravity ceases to exist and things float, and you experience the closest thing to what you would experience in outer space, or what you would experience if you were suspended in air, like shot out of a volcano. So I'm like, okay. And I have to admit, I was very nervous about this. I said, okay, like 15, 20 seconds. They said, okay. We have, and we went into this place. I'm trying to remember where it was. It was it was a small airport by the beach, like Marina del Rey or something. I don't exactly remember. But we went there, and there was this dude who was a flight instructor. And he said, hey, he was all excited that, these Imagineers were coming here for this experience. And he gave us a short lecture in this room, with a chalkboard. And he explained what a parabola was and how we were going to experience zero gravity. And he had chalk that he was drawing on the blackboard and an eraser and the whole bit. And we were like, okay, we're good. And I was really nervous because, one of the worst things in the world for me is to feel motion sickness. I don't really feel it that much, but I have this, unexplainable phobia about it. So I was like, oh, God, I'm going to go up in this thing that's known for making people puke, basically, just to justify what I just said. so that everyone was like, yeah, 20 seconds is about right. Anyway, so we get into this little Cessna airplane. And as I recall, a couple of the seats in the back were removed. So it seated about, it was supposed to seat like 6, but there was only 4 of us. There was a pilot, there was one of the guys who was in the co-pilot seat, and then me and another guy were in the back, with this little space between us. This guy, takes off out of the little private airport and ascends. And initially it was pretty damn cool. I mean, you get to 1,000 feet, and then I think I remember he got us up to about 2,500 to 3,000 feet, as I recall. So it's not like a commercial airline where they're up at 30,000 feet, but we were up there high enough that, things were way down there, and it was safe for him to do his maneuvers. So he goes, okay, and he hands me the chalkboard eraser that we had in his little classroom. This guy, again, was a flight instructor. And he goes, I want you to hold this in the middle of the plane just so I can see it out of the corner of my eye. So I'm in the back seat, so I'm reaching my hand out with this chalkboard eraser to be level with the, periphery of his vision. And he says, I'm gonna fly what I think is a parabola. I'm going to fly an arc where I'm going to accelerate and go over the top of this arc, and then we're going to drop down rapidly. So he says, but at the parabola, you're going to experience zero gravity. And he says, I don't have anything on here instrument panel wise that tells me when I'm at 0 G's. So if you don't mind, hold this eraser in your hand so I can see it. And when I see it start to float, I'll know we're at 0 G's. And I'll do my best, to hold that parabola as long as I can. I'm like, oh God. So he proceeds to gun this Cessna up into the sky. And some of us were brave enough, even though we were unofficially told if we didn't want to wear a seatbelt, we could. And I thought, okay, I need to experience this full blast. So I unlatched my seatbelt. And we're in the first parabola that this pilot was flying. And guns the motor. We're going, all you could see was the blue of the sky going up. And then all of a sudden the plane starts to pitch and level out a little bit, which was the top of the arc. Imagine a half circle. And my eraser out of my hand flies out of my hand and doesn't float for very long. It floated for a second or two, but then it stuck to the ceiling of the airplane. And the first sensation I had at zero gravity was that it felt like all the blood in my body was racing to my head. And the only other sensations I had ever had in my life that, that were equivalent to this were if you've ever fallen or anything like that, and for a split second, you feel that feeling where, you're like, oh crap, I'm going to eat it. I'm in the mid-air here. My feet aren't on the ground. I'm not planted with gravity. And but imagine that split second extended, and all these other sensations of the blood rushing to my head and everything. And of course the eraser from the blackboard being stuck to the ceiling. So he was real calm about it, and he just kind of started to level out. And he goes, "Okay, we're gonna." I think that was a little bit sharp as far as the angle of the parabola. I'm gonna even this out a little bit, do a less severe arc, and see how long I can hold it. And so he proceeds to level out the plane, then all of a sudden dive the plane down. We're at 2,500 to 3,000 feet above. What you could see down was the beach and Marina Del Rey and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, oh, shit. And he dives the plane down, then all of a sudden pulls it up and proceeds to do a gentle parabolic arc, quote unquote. And this time, my hand that had the eraser in it, the eraser just gently came off of my hand and started to fly in a rotation off of my hand in midair. And the pilot was looking real quickly. He'd turn his head real quickly and look at the eraser and judge his navigation based on, what was going on physically with this eraser. And, but I was trying to be, I was trying to experience this whole thing. So I didn't have my seatbelt on. So all of a sudden I feel my ass lifting off the seat. And me too. I'm starting to float like this eraser, blood rushing to my head, although I had adjusted to that a little bit. But it was the most weird feeling, of course, I had ever experienced in my life. And he finished. You could only go so long on the parabola, on the arc, with a plane, especially that size, before you have to descend. And as he descended, the eraser came back down into my hand, and my butt went back down on the seat. And he put me through this like 3 or 4 times, trying to perfect the maximum length of time of a parabola. Because what this was going to be equated to is that we were creating a ride. Imagine a roller coaster like ride, although this wasn't a roller coaster. But at the end, when you got shot out of the volcano, they were trying to figure out what angle to make the track so that people could feel zero gravity, like they were shot out of the top of the volcano, and that there was no friction or any other, it just felt like they were floating. So, anyway, I'm sorry, I was making a meatloaf, so please cut that part out, Kurt, and start it here. So anyway, we got to a point where I was like, wow, that felt like a long time. And it wasn't that comfortable until the 3rd or 4th time, and then I got a little bit used to it. But for the general public to experience what I had experienced was very dramatic, is a kind word for it. I mean, when you experience zero gravity for the first time, it's exhilarating, but also simultaneously quite daunting and frightening. So I quickly changed my mind and said, I think the longest he was able to hold it was 12 seconds, as I remember. The parabola, zero gravity. So, of course, I said afterwards, wow, what was I talking about? 20 seconds or whatever I said. So we went back to the engineers and I, and we had a meeting, and we decided that, of course, 20 seconds was way too long. Not only that, but also zero gravity was not comfortable for, for people who hadn't experienced it before. So we decided that we needed to get in the neighborhood of like 0.1 or 0.2 G's. So that, in other words, so that you weren't literally floating at the top of this parabola, but you felt like you weighed 5 pounds, So, and that it should only last for a matter of seconds, not 20 frickin' seconds, And so that's the decision we made based on that experience and what you would experience now if you ride the ride Journey to the Center of the Earth in Tokyo DisneySea. What preceded it was evaluation as to what the majority of people would be acceptable to and comfortable with, without scaring the living crap out of everybody, or worse. That would have been a really difficult thing if you did that, because they'd be cleaning the ride vehicles out daily with a hose. So anyway, that trip to Japan was really my first of a couple once I started the Disney company. Now remember, I was a director of attraction development at the Mitsubishi Corporation, and then before that at Sequoia Creative. So, and in both those jobs, I went to Japan a number of times. So being in Japan was not new to me. But being in Japan for Disney and seeing the site where this amazing theme park was going to go was indeed an exciting experience. So in the next episode, I'll tell you some of the shenanigans that went on that trip. And this time I'm going to name a few names, just first names, because I developed some good friendships with fellow Imagineers. Only 3 others that went on this trip after this one I just explained, when we all went to Japan and looked at the landfill where this whole theme park was going to go, and just explored Japanese culture. And it was extremely fun, and for some of them it was very mysterious. We were all kind of very open-minded, crazy, artistic soulmates. So the whole experience was it was pretty insane, but I created some bonds with my teammates here. It was one of the main trips in the beginning of my experiences with Imagineering that finally solidified, the fact that I was, a good guy, a good person. And they even had shared stories where when I first came on board, all of them were like, who the hell is this guy? Why are they hiring somebody when they're laying off some of our friends and all this stuff? But luckily, I was blessed with the fact that they saw the spirit inside of me and accepted me as a teammate and part of this amazing project that was about to happen.